So I want to just lift up what Malcolm said about achdut, about the sense of Jewish unity, and say something that I think will be challenging for us. And that is, to what degree is the state of Israel at this moment in time actually getting in the way of that sense of Jewish unity? Israel is at the center of my Jewish life. It is a part of who I am and the movement that I lead. But one of the most challenging things is that the state of Israel has this incredible alliance now that gives political power to the rabbinut, to the rabbinate, the ultra-Orthodox rabbinate in particular. And it's very problematic. And what Rachel said about the Jew in Tel Aviv is the Israeli in Tel Aviv, who has become disaffected, many of them, because they're not allowed to find their voice. They're not allowed to be married officially by the person that they would choose. And first of all, I believe in Jewish unity. One quick story. In our little Medina in Westchester, New York, they were putting the Eruv around a new path. So my chaver, my Orthodox rabbi, beloved friend, argued with his colleagues to include the Reform Synagogue within the Eruv. They said, why would you do that? He said, so it would be easier for our communities to celebrate happy occasions together. Now, people say, why doesn't that happen? What is it about that sensibility? And the answer is that he does not have political power. I do not have political power. We are Jewish leaders. We base our leadership on Torah, on commitment to Am Yisrael. And we know for the sake of unity, we're willing to compromise because we must, and we take responsibility for one another. One of the greatest challenges at this moment in Israel, and the existential realities are real, they're not imagined. Israel faces enormous challenges with the BDS movement worldwide, with Iran, but it also faces an existential threat to its very soul and character, and that is something you don't hear discussed in honest and helpful ways. Here, unless we get a conversion bill that's going to send the diaspora into, a tizzy, we don't talk about it, and there are concrete ways that we could strengthen Jewish unity. I pray that all of us will work towards that, because that is a key value.
Right. We only have 15 minutes left, so I do want to open it up to questions. I ask you to identify yourself, keep your questions short, and if possible, direct them at a member of the panel. Is it possible to turn the lights on? I guess not. I can just see hands up, so if is there someone with a microphone? Yes. Okay. Okay, very good. Sir, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Yehuda Dajou. I'm coming from France. I live in Jerusalem for 24 years. My question is, how is it possible to reach unity of Am Yisrael if you remain outside?
Anyone like to answer that? How can we maintain the unity of Am Yisrael with the diaspora community outside?
We've done pretty well for a few thousand years. I would just lift up the book of Esther. Not only is the diaspora potentially, an essential part, but there are times when literally the leadership of the Jewish people has come from the diaspora. We're bound together. We, by the way, don't necessarily have Jewish unity within the Jewish state. So how are we going to have it outside and inside? And I agree with you, the centrality.
Okay, all right. Again, I'm going to ask you to direct your question to someone. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Look, the fundamental point that the rabbi is making is right, that in your question. Aliyah should be seen as the highest value. There is no existence as a Jew outside, and that is fulfilling, because much of our calendar, many mitzvot, are only fulfilled when you live in Israel. But that does not denigrate the ability of Jews to live outside. The Torah was not given here. It was given to show that we had a constitution before we had the state. We're the only people in the world who had that, because it is transportable in all times, and there were times when Jews lived in diaspora. The question you should ask rightly is, how do we encourage people and create circumstances that people will be attracted to come to Israel, which is the homeland of the Jewish people, and will be strengthened by the presence of all Jews here?
I think that was very nicely answered. Next question. The microphone, I believe, is there. Go ahead.
I have a microphone here.
Oh, okay. Let's start on that side then.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a question because you talk just a little bit about assimilation. And as many people here, I think we all know people who have a non-Jewish parent, non-mother or the father who is not Jewish. Okay, and I'm thinking right now about two categories of people. Categories of people who think that they are out of the Jewish community, and it doesn't worth it to go back to the Jewish community because they will not get anything of them. Okay, I'm thinking about these children and thinking about the gay people that think that it doesn't worth it.
Okay, I'll ask your question, sir, and please direct it.
Okay, sorry. What is your answer to this situation?
Who are you asking the question to?
To all of you, actually. What do you think you can do for these people? Because you talk a lot about including all of the Jewish people. So what you can do for them?
Okay, who would like to answer
We didn't
that?
decide this situation, of course.
Go ahead.
I think the challenge you mention is great and far and wide and very complex. And I don't believe we'll resolve that answer today in this room. However, I think a big question to ask is what is the Jewish leadership and communities doing about that problem? And when I look around Jewish leadership in the diaspora, I see, and please take this as you will, a leadership that is ageing, and leadership that is not innovative and not that creative, especially in the Zionist leadership. And maybe, as I've seen in my community, you change the style of leadership, you change the way that you behave, and you create ways for those unaffiliated people, the people that have assimilated. There are ways that you can bring them back in. And we have done many projects to bring those people back into our community, and now they're active, going on programs to Israel, coming back to Shul, coming to Yom HaZikaron, coming to Yom HaShoah, coming back to the big events that we share culturally as Jews. And if we can find and challenge the leadership within our own communities, because I believe that's the first way to challenge it back.
All right, thanks. Rabbi Jacobs just wants to make a comment.
So if I just could lift up Boston in the United States for one moment. Barry Schrage, who leads CJP, the federation in Boston, often cites that the national percentage for interfaith children who are raised in the Jewish community, in the Jewish tradition, is 30% across the country. In Boston, it is 60%. It's not the Red Sox, it's not the food, it's not the weather. They have a community-wide policy and commitment to welcome interfaith families into the Jewish community, and they are changing the Jewish future by doing so. There are concrete things for us to do, and you mentioned gay and lesbian Jews, who also, as you say, have often felt outside. There is a real opportunity for us to open those tent flaps. Emanuele said it beautifully. If we don't do that, then we're going to face the future with fear and with the demographers winning. And honestly, there's a lot we can do that we're not doing that would change the Jewish future.
All right, let's take the next question.
Thank you. My name is Sharon. I'm the CEO of Together. And I would like to talk about, to ask something that connects to what Rachel mentioned and Rick talked about. And I would like to ask Malcolm about it. Together is kind of a social network that connects Jews all around the world through hosting. When I tell people about this project, when I tell Israeli people about this project, they immediately, if they are not religious, they immediately think, okay, it's something religious. When I talk to American Jews about it, they welcome it in a different way. And it shows me the gap that you mentioned about the conception of Judaism in different places. What do you think people in the diaspora should do to change this conception inside Israel? Is there a way to change the conception of Judaism in Israel?
Malcolm. Really, it was...
As executive of the Conference of Presidents, I discuss religious issues. So I have a good out for it. Look, I will tell you that I do think that we need overall creativity. You mentioned before about Chabad about Chabad's success in Mexico and in other places. What is it they offer that enables people who are not Orthodox? I'm coming to it. Don't preempt it. Don't step on my good punchlines. That brings non-Orthodox and certainly non-Chabad people to there. The answer is Kiddush. A good Kiddush and a good cholent brings people, but it's also warmth and openness. Avram's tent was open on all four sides because he brought in people, and that was the prototype for Jews throughout the ages. I do think we have to have standards. I don't want to see rifts in the Jewish people that will mean that Jewish children can't marry other Jewish children, that we should have to have some way to come to some common standards that will heal the wounds and make sure that all of us can be part of Am Echad, Belev Echad, but truly Belev Echad, not second-guessing. So, as I said, I believe in the smorgasbord approach. I also believe that we can do many creative things. You know, I once went to Sharon when he was prime minister, and I said to him, you know, I just seen a study that said that there were 750,000 or 1 million singles in the Tel Aviv area. And 3/4 of them, or more, much more in fact, said that they were looking for a spouse, but it wasn't a lifestyle choice, it was something that not just happened. In New York, we have, and in the United States, more than 1 million Jewish singles. I said to him, why don't you take an initiative and bring all the singles together? It doesn't matter what they will come from. In East Europe, I had met a group of a couple hundred Jewish singles that come together periodic, but they have such a limited choice in Europe and elsewhere. Can you imagine if we would have once a month, every Rosh Chodesh, gatherings of thousands and thousands of singles? So he said to me, but you know what? It'll lead to Yeridah. I said, so what? But you'll have Jewish families who ultimately will make Aliyah. They will come back. They will be part of the Jewish people. It's only one example, but there are things that could be done that cross all of the ideological and other lines, traditional lines, that we have to look to find creative solutions to the real challenges. And it's a question of the context in which you put it. I told Rabbi Jacobs before about an issue I discussed yesterday with the leaders of Israel about language that they use on a very sensitive issue. It's not what they do, it's how it's presented, it's how it's perceived. So many of the things, the question is how we talk to each other, what kind of language, that we often unintentionally build barriers rather than tear down barriers. And I think that creative solutions, like the World Shidduch effort, would help bring all people together and say, look, we have a common future. You're worried about the demographics? Have babies. Let's stop less meetings, more babies. We do much better.
The World Shidduch Panel, that's what we're going to call this. We have time for one last question on the left.
Hi, good afternoon.
Make it a motto for
My
you.
name is Deborah Lax. I work right now for the Hallelujah Project, and I'm also affiliated with Abonin Dror. I have two questions. The first one is for Judith, and the second one will be for Rachel. As a former diaspora Jew, I was born in Peru and raised in Costa Rica. I do not feel that the Latin American community is doing anything or doing much to reach those non-affiliated Jews, or as the rabbi would call them, those non-inspired Jews. I feel the Latin communities are very closed in themselves, and it's a pity because there's a lot of they call them lost Jews, at least in Costa Rica, that would like to be affiliated. They either have one parent that's not Jewish, and then because of that, the strong Orthodox communities don't accept them. And I wanted to know if this has changed, because I made Aliyah a little bit more than 3 years ago, and I'd love to hear if it changed.
Okay.
And the other question was for Rachel. You mentioned that Israelis, you'd like to know if Israelis care, if at all, about Jewish communities in the diaspora. I feel that when I made Aliyah, all Israelis were constantly wanting to learn about me, constantly wanting to hear where I came from. What did I do all my life? Why did I make Aliyah? Why am I here all of a sudden? And I think that is proof that they want to learn more. I don't know if you are aware that there are many initiatives, you probably are, that try to connect these the Israeli youth, at least the ones I'm aware of, with the diaspora youth, initiatives like Masa that bring diaspora Jews to live in Israel for months, from 5 to 10 months, and that gives the Israelis the possibilities to learn about these diaspora Jews. Taglit also does that in 10 days, and initiatives like what I work with, the Hallelujah Project. It's an amazing initiative that also tries to do this connection.
All right, thanks. I think you made yourself clear. Go
Can
ahead.
I make a short example about what has to be compromise and creativity in the diaspora and what is not? What is not a compromise, it's a very famous and short joke about one Jew survivor in a small island in the Caribbean Sea, the only inhabitant, which after many years a boat came to save him and found out that he built up 2 synagogues. Why did you build up 2 synagogues? Because I want to be sure that I can be able to say that I never get in the second one. And a very good example of creativity and compromise in the diaspora. I remember in the synagogue of Stockholm in Sweden, there was a long discussion among Orthodox and non-Orthodox people. And they decided to be all together in the same synagogue. Half of the synagogue has the women on the upper side and the men on the bottom. And the other side, the left side of the synagogue, they are all together. And I think that in the diaspora, we need creativity and compromise to survive.
Thank you. I'm going to let Rachel and Judith make the final remarks, and then we'll close.
Thank you. Well, let me first refer to what has been here analyzed, and I would say that a shared Jewish problem today, or a shared problem that Israel and diaspora's Jewish communities face, is how diversity and pluralism became part of a normative and cultural requirement to build the Jewish collective life today. And this is a point we are facing and we are sharing it. It's not only a matter of continuity, but also the way we guarantee expanding the understanding. Then the second is that we are aware that the normative core, the consensus that used to historically accompany Jewish life and Jewish culture and Jewish people seems to narrow, and this consensus brings us to explore and define the scope, the frontier, and who is in and who is out, right? That's what we are facing now. So it's a problem really shared, and imagination is required in almost all parts of the Jewish world. It's not only a problem of affiliated or non-affiliated Jews, because today we had a session, Emmanuel was shared with us the session, where we said, probably from the perspective of the traditional structure of the Jewish community, there are increased number of non-affiliated, but there are other ways of being Jew. All this idea of the inner self that has been so well analyzed for the states, right? By colleagues that have done really a very, very important research on that, right? How people look through new individual ways, how all these social networks, how all these social ways of communication that they are not immediately visible, but they also constitute community. And of course, for a younger generation, this is part of what it's not immediately evident. So for the Latin American Jewish life, I would say that if you take Argentina, the rates of affiliation are similar to the media in the United States. And if you take Mexico, the 50-60%. If you take Mexico, you are close to 85%. Other indicators, Jewish education, it is the same. Then another indicator, exogamy. So what I would suggest is to start to analyze how there is, I mean, you are a Jew in certain conditions, in certain communal conditions, in certain societies, in certain cultures, and for me the big challenge is how we really can build Jewish communal life in a world that is interacting, right?
Right. Rachel.
Thank you for your question, and I think that I haven't got the time to explain it fully, but what I want to share with you is a very simple point, and something I've observed over the years as well, and especially in my work in New Zealand dealing with so many Israelis coming in. The Israelis that come into New Zealand, and this will hopefully answer your question, see themselves as Israelis. I see myself as a Jew first. And that is what I see as the key difference. When you see yourself as part of a nation, and that's your nationhood, and they're Israeli, then our starting points are very different. I see myself as a Jew first, and that is how I construct my world. So when I say that the Jew in Tel Aviv serving me coffee I really care about my community, it's because our starting points are so dramatically different. So I'm conscious of the time, but I would love to chat with you later about it.
Rachel, I would add with your
I'd like to, on behalf of all of you, thank our wonderful panelists. It's been a very interesting discussion, and look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much.